Thank you so much for being here for the premier NSPW virtual session. So as the program chair, co-chair this year, John and I have arranged this idea, his bright idea of Reiner's, to give us some sense of what a virtual NSPW session might look like. I think we're all keenly aware of how the COVID pandemic has changed a variety of aspects of life in the month that it's been ongoing now. And I think it's pretty uncertain what it's going to look like headed into the fall, that we're starting to prepare for and think about the possibility that this could extend as far as the conference. So today we're doing a couple things. We're recording this session because we're going to edit it and post it to the website, hopefully in an effort to demonstrate to potential authors that the richness and the value of NSPW sessions can be replicated online, and to give some indication of what that might look like. But at the same time, we're also kind of experimenting with what NSPW might look like online. What does the social contract mean in the context of being online?
So Nathan is a PhD student in computer science at UC Berkeley. He works on usable security and privacy, and he's going to give us a talk about privacy controls for always listening devices. Go ahead, Nathan.
Hi, everyone. Yes, so for those who haven't met me, I'm Nathan. I'm a PhD student at UC Berkeley, and today I want to talk about privacy controls for always listening devices. And so I have two goals for this mini presentation. The first one is to define what I mean by always listening devices. And the second, because there's just so many different things we can talk about, I want to sort of narrow the scope and tell you about the specific questions I'm most interested in getting feedback on. And these examples and use cases, not all of them are hypothetical. We know the companies are thinking about them as well. We know this, for example, from the patents that they've been filing. As a concrete example, last year, here's a patent Amazon was granted on pre-wake word speech processing, which is exactly the kind of thing I was just talking about. And so these are the kinds of advanced functionalities that we're thinking about when we're talking about these always listening devices, where them becoming even smarter than becoming always listening. Of course, when that happens, that doesn't mean the current functionality is going to go away. You'll still be able to invoke them directly. But for the purposes of this discussion, I'm especially interested in these new capabilities of what we call passive listening. So listening and actively analyzing ambient audio that isn't necessarily directed to the device. Clearly, these current permissions and current privacy controls aren't really adequate, so we need something better, but what does that look like? And so that's the question I want to talk about today. And finally, as a sort of meta question, it's how can we investigate these topics? How can we study them using the rigorous and empirical methods that we're used to, given that things like user studies and system reverse engineering, things like that, assume that the device actually exists, whereas for now, passive listening devices are hypothetical. You can't go out to a store and buy them, and the technology isn't quite there to even make a really fully functioning prototype. So then how do we study this? How do we investigate it?
So I really enjoyed the paper a great deal. Thank you, Nathan. It's not anything in my area, so I found the setup of the problem space and what you were thinking about both accessible and thorough, and I really appreciate that.
I wanted to ask a question following up on what Mez was saying about different people with different preferences. And what if those preferences not merely are different, but are conflicting? I'm having an argument with my kid, and the kid wants it recorded, and I don't, or vice versa.
Based on the research I've done and some other papers I've read, it seems that people are reacting to ubiquity by sort of letting them blend into the background. So rather than maintaining a constant state of alarm, it's like, oh, that device is listening to me all the time, it's more likely that people are just allowed to run and assume it doesn't do anything bad. So in a study I ran at this point, I think it was around a year ago, we asked people whether they unplugged the device or even used the mute button. And we found that, I want to say less than a quarter of people did. And I think that's consistent with other research that I've seen, where relatively few people engage in these protective measures or using the privacy controls. For the most part, most of the interactions today tend to be relatively mundane. 90% are hey, so-and-so play this or stop or louder, quieter. And so people aren't as worried about that being heard because they're assuming these devices are well behaved. Once we move to this brave new world of it listening all the time, that's obviously going to be not true because they're going to be listening for, or they're going to be hearing things that are much more sensitive. And that's, I think, where the first half of your question comes into play, where these preferences are going to be mismatched. And that really complicates the situation. I think this is really difficult because even for today's much simpler devices, we don't have an answer.
What I liked is that you really try to measure the benefits of what you're trying to propose. And I was wondering a bit, like, what exactly is the metric here?
Do you have any thoughts as to how you actually gather information to make an informed risk assessment on this in this area?
And so for this, the best method we've had so far is basically sitting participants down and walking them through the scenario, suggesting either role playing or kind of a detailed explanation of like, okay, here's this new world that you're living in. You have this device, it hears you all the time. You want it to hear you because here are some of the nice things it provides. Now let's talk about privacy. I'm not fully satisfied on, but that's the best I have right now. And one of the interesting things I'd love to get feedback on is, are there better ways of doing this?
Great. Thanks, everyone. I think we're going to close questions for now. This is a really great session, and I think it really shows the sort of character of the NSPW community that we're able to sort of have such a good discussion virtually with some of the constraints. I'm going to kick it to Elizabeth to close us out.
And thank you to everybody for attending, for reading the paper, for, as ever, participating in the NSPW spirit of discussion, which I think I really did feel here just now. We're about to talk about how it can be improved, but I'm encouraged by this whole kind of experience. One thing I did want to announce publicly on here and will be made is already available on the website. Is that we've extended the submission deadline to May 22nd. We had quite a bit of time in the time period, and given the kind of interruptions on work that the pandemic crisis is creating for lots of people, we hope that this extra 2 weeks will provide time for people to put in NSPW submissions when they might not otherwise be.